July 22nd, 2017. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we are continuing now with the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Ones, and we are in this chapter which begins by explaining how, if a monk develops a particular quality just for the time of a finger snap, that monk is not devoid of jhana, which here in this sense I would take not necessarily to mean the meditative absorption, but simply meditation. One who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, that is, who's putting into practice the Buddha's teaching, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. That is, a monk who makes himself worthy of the offerings of people, the offerings of alms food. Okay, so this pattern is, or let's say this formula is applied in different patterns according to different groups of training factors. So what we covered last time, briefly, the 4 jhanas, the 4 brahmaviharas, the divine dwellings, and the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And I pointed out last time that, when we hear the expression, the 4 foundations of mindfulness or the 4 establishments of mindfulness, one immediately thinks, that is mindfulness. But if one looks carefully at the formula, we see that the establishing of each foundation of mindfulness it's actually a complex process involving a number of factors. So it's said here that the monk dwells contemplating the body and the body, ardent, and ardent implies the setting up of energy. So under the 4 foundations, under any foundation of mindfulness, we have energy, then, of course, we have that he's mindful, so that implies the presence of mindfulness. And then we have, or I skipped this one, we have clearly comprehending, so that is clear comprehension, which is a kind of elementary or a germinal form of wisdom. And then there is, on the negative side, there's the removal of certain states which are the obstacles to the practice. These are summed up as longing or craving and dejection, which implies ill will. Okay, so that is the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And now we come to the second group of factors mentioned here. And if you see the progression in the formulas, you can recognize at once that the text is going into what are called the 37 Bodhipakkhya dharmas. Those are the 37 states or qualities that are on the side of enlightenment, or the 37 qualities that are conducive to enlightenment. Or some translate the 37 wings to awakening. Okay, so we start out, the first group of aids to enlightenment are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Now we come to the second group. This is called the 4 kinds of right striving. In Pali, it's called the 4 Sammapadana. Of course, samma means right or correct, and the word padana is effort, endeavor, striving. And so we have 4 right efforts, 4 right kinds of striving, because first, the qualities of mind that are to be dealt with, that are to be, towards which one is to apply right striving, divide first into 2 broad types, the unwholesome and the wholesome. And then with regard to each of these, there is a 2-fold task. In regard to the unwholesome, one has the task of preventing the arising. And then the second task is to abandon or remove what has arisen, the arisen unwholesome states. And then with regard to the wholesome mental qualities, again there are 2 tasks. One is to arouse those that have not arisen. And then the second is to stabilize and develop the arisen wholesome states. So you could say that in this one quality that we call right effort, there are these subtle distinctions, kind of multiple tasks, multitasking. Okay, now when we look at the formula, again, we're going to see that there's, within each aspect of right striving or right effort, there is a cluster of factors that are involved. Okay, with regard to the first, one generates desire for the non-arising of unarisen, bad, unwholesome qualities. So here we have desire under right effort. So we could say that there's like a constellation of factors here that begins with desire. And this is, the Pali word is chanda. And sometimes when you come across popular presentations of Buddhism, the writer or speaker will say, according to Buddhism, the cause of suffering is desire, and so one is supposed to get rid of all desire. But that is actually a somewhat misrepresentation, whether deliberate or unintentional, because according to the formula of the Four Noble Truths, what is the cause of suffering is not really simply desire, but it is unwholesome desire. And the word used is not chanda, but tanha, which it's literally thirst. It's desire in the form of craving, selfish, egotistical desire. But there is also a desire for the good, which I'm going to come to in a moment. Okay, so this is the desire so that unwholesome qualities, whatever they might be, greed, hatred, delusion, the 5 mental hindrances, longing and dejection, so that those states do not arise. One arouses, generates the desire. Okay, then comes one makes an effort arouses energy, then I skip over this for a moment, and strives. So here we have 3 verbs. So one makes an effort. This is the verb here used as vayamati, from which we get the expression sama vayama, which is the 6th factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort. So here, under right effort, we have effort itself, and then one arouses energy, and here the word used for energy is virya, and so energy and effort are taken to be synonyms. And then one strives. This is the verb padahati, from which we get the noun padana. So we have effort, energy, striving. These 3 are taken to be just alternative expressions, synonymous expressions. So they're all really representing the factor of effort or energy. And then the other factor, which is mentioned here, that I skipped over, is that one applies the mind. Chitang paganhati. Paganhati is literally sort of pushes out, extends out the mind. So this is the word chitta. And so when we speak about the 4 right efforts, we think in the first instance, if we use like the Abhidharmic system, then the 4 right efforts are just 4 modes of applying energy, the energy of the mind. But when we look at the sutta formula, we see that under each right effort, there's actually this collusion, so to speak, of several mental factors, this collaboration of several mental factors that are working together. So the predominant mental factor here is that of effort or energy. But energy, it's propelled by desire, and it involves the application of the mind. Okay, so we have the first effort to prevent the arising of unarisen bad, unwholesome qualities. The second right effort is for the abandoning of arisen bad, unwholesome qualities. The third right effort is for the arising of unarisen wholesome qualities. And the fourth right effort is for the maintenance or stabilizing of arisen wholesome qualities, for their increase, expansion, and fulfillment by development. Yeah, then looking through another part of the Anguttara Nikaya, I found a sutta which elaborates on these four right efforts, which explains each having its own particular task. Okay, so in this sutta, the Buddha speaks about four kinds of striving. So these correspond to the four right kinds of striving that I just mentioned, but here he gives them different designations. They're striving by restraint, striving by abandonment, striving by development, and striving by protection. Okay, so what is striving by restraint? So this would be the first of the four kinds of right effort. So here it's explained with reference to the restraint of the sense faculties. So here the monk, having seen a visible form with the eyes, does not grasp its marks, that the mark and its features. The marks is the general or the outstanding characteristic of the visible object. The features are the detailed characteristic. Okay, then it says that if he left the eye faculty unrestrained, then bad, unwholesome states of longing and dejection, liking and disliking might invade him. And so to prevent this, he exercises restraint over the eye and guards the eye faculty. Same is said with regard to the ear, nose, tongue, body, and the mental faculty. Okay, so that is the right effort as a form of restraint, the first kind of right effort. Now comes the right effort or striving by abandonment. So what is meant here by abandonment? Here the monk does not tolerate an arisen sensual thought, but he abandons it, dispels it, terminates it, and obliterates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will, a thought of harming, or any other kind of bad, unwholesome states that arise, but he abandons them, dispels them, and so forth. Okay, so it's inevitable, even if one is training diligently, that these unwholesome states of mind will arise, unwholesome thoughts. And so to fulfill the second factor of right effort, one makes the effort to abandon those states whenever they arise. And in fact, to abandon the state, even though the passage on right effort doesn't mention mindfulness, but one has to use mindfulness to recognize or to be aware of the state when it's arisen. And then one has to use clear comprehension to be able to identify that state when it's arisen. Because sometimes the states arise and they can, linger in the mind, and maybe there'll be a kind of dull mindfulness of them. So one is mindful of them, but if one doesn't precisely identify them, then one won't recognize this is that particular unwholesome state. Say a sensual thought arises, there could be a kind of background mindfulness of it. That kind of state has arisen. And then one drifts along with that state, sort of just keeping that subdued mindfulness present but in the background. But it's when one uses clear comprehension to recognize that's a sensual thought. That should be overcome, that should be abandoned. Then one makes the effort to abandon it. Okay, so that's the effort to abandon. Okay, then comes the third type of right effort. This is striving by development. So this can be the effort to develop, I would actually say, any of the wholesome qualities. But here the passage mentions the 7 factors of enlightenment, which we'll come to a little bit later. I would think one could replace the 7 factors of enlightenment with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then one starts at a more elementary place. So one has the effort to develop mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of states of mind, mindfulness of dharmas, phenomena. And in fact, that is the first factor of enlightenment from which the other factors of enlightenment will emerge. Okay, then the 4th type of right effort is said to be the effort to stabilize the arisen wholesome states. So if we take that way of formulating the 4th right effort, we could say that when any of these factors of enlightenment have arisen, or when any of the 4 foundations of mindfulness have arisen, one makes the effort to maintain those factors of enlightenment, to strengthen them, and to bring them to maturity. But here, the sutta doesn't explain the effort, the striving to protect in quite that way, but rather it mentions maintaining, the effort to maintain a particular meditation object. And for some reason, I don't know the reason, but it mentions as the meditation object to be maintained, I think there are 6 mentioned here. 6 of the perceptions of a corpse in stages of decay. So there is the perception of the skeleton, the perception of the... I hope I'm not ruining anybody's breakfast. The perception of the worm-infested corpse, the perception of the livid or bluish corpse, the perception of a festering corpse, the perception of a fissured corpse. Kaidi must be wondering what's going on. She just slipped in here. What are these people talking about? The perception of a bloated corpse. Richard?
Isn't the temporal order of those the other way?
Actually, that is really the case. Yeah, that is actually the case. Particularly, I think that works with all of them, that they're all in inverted order. I think so, yeah. I know normally the skeleton comes last and the bloated corpse comes first, or it comes early. Yeah, I don't know why. Anyway, perhaps it just occurred to me the reason that the perception of the corpse is mentioned, perhaps because this particular perception is very difficult to maintain because it's unpleasurable. And so one has to make a determined effort, if one has chosen this as the meditation object, to keep that perception in mind. That's just my guess as to the reason. Okay, so this takes care of the 4 right efforts, or the 4 kinds of right striving. Let's pass on, before I take any questions, let us pass on to the next group of factors. These are called the 4 Iddhipadas. And the word iddhi has at least two nuances. One, the more general or common meaning, is simply success. So it's the success when one undertakes some endeavor. It's reaching success in that endeavor. The second meaning of iddhi is a more specialized meaning, and this is the ability to exercise certain types of powers that would be considered supernatural, supernormal, miraculous. We can call them psychic powers, powers that sort of go beyond the bounds of our limited rational mind, like the ability to multiply the body, to walk on water, to dive in and out of the earth, to fly through the sky, to reach up and to touch the sun and the moon. Okay, and then the word pada means, literally, the original meaning is feet, but a foot is something that supports the body. It's the basis for the body. So these would be the bases for iddhi, both the basis for success in the general sense, and also the basis for the exercise of psychic powers. What do they use the Chinese for iddhipada? Shen. Which Shen is this? Oh, I see. Like a spirit. Okay. Okay, so now when we look at the formula for the 4 Iddhipadas, we're going to see that each one again involves a collaboration of a number of factors. Okay, so here we have the first one. One develops the basis for psychic potency. That's the way I translated iti, as psychic potency, and pada is basis. So the basis for psychic potency that possesses concentration due to desire. And activities of striving. Okay, the second one develops the basis for psychic potency that possesses concentration due to energy and activities of striving. One develops the basis for psychic potency that possesses concentration due to mind and activities of striving. And then the last one develops the basis for psychic potency that possesses concentration due to investigation and activities of striving. So we could say that there's 4 types of psychic potency which are differentiated on the basis of their predominant factor, sort of the driving factor behind concentration. That is desire, energy, mind, and investigation. And apart from that difference, the formulas are the same. But if we look at the formulas, we see that there's a certain complexity to them. Okay, so each one possesses concentration, and then each one possesses what are called activity, or what I've translated as activities of striving. The Pali expression used here is for activities of striving. Padana Sankara. And you can see the word padana here is exactly the same as the word that's used in the 4 right kinds of striving, which is sama padana. So you could see that there's an interdependence of the 4 kinds of psychic potency, or the 4 bases of psychic potency, with the 4 kinds of right effort, right striving. And then each one possesses concentration, and the word here is samadhi. And so what's being emphasized in the 4 bases of psychic power is samadhi. And the samadhi is attained, in each case, samadhi is attained through these activities of striving. But the samadhi will have a different flavor in the 4 cases because a different factor will be involved as the driving force or the chief force in the attainment of samadhi. That is, the differentiating factor will be desire, and again, the word for desire is chanda. So we have under the iti-pada, we have the differentiation is whether it's desire, energy, mind, or investigation. So those are the four differentiating factors, and each of these, we could say, it's coupled with these activities of striving to culminate in samadhi, concentration. And then this samadhi, or concentration, that arises through this combined activity of one or another of these four factors with right striving, this samadhi then becomes the basis for exercising these supernormal powers. And normally it's said that to exercise the supernormal powers, the samadhi has to be cultivated to the level of the fourth jhana. In fact, according to the method of the Visuddhimagga, even the four jhanas is not enough, but you have to attain, on top of the four jhanas, the four formless meditations. Then one has to be able to master them so that one can go up and down them, go in and out, back and forth, achieving them with different meditation objects so that one could exercise this incredible type of mental gymnastics with samadhi. And that makes the mind extremely powerful, extremely flexible, extremely adaptable and workable, able to touch onto what we might call supersensory levels of causal influence. And so, if I want to create a cup, I just make the determination, let the cup be here, and boom, the cup is here. And what is interesting, when you look at the suttas, there's a chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya about the four iddhipadas, and I took a selection of suttas from that chapter to show that some of the suttas just speak about the four bases for spiritual power in a way that, in the same way that the suttas will speak about the other groups of aids to enlightenment, the other wings to awakening. That doesn't distinguish them in any way as being the special method for developing the psychic powers. For example, we could just go through some of these. Okay, so this says, those who have neglected the four bases for spiritual power have neglected the noble path leading to the complete destruction of suffering. Those who have undertaken and practiced the four bases for spiritual power have undertaken the noble path leading to the complete destruction of suffering. Okay, then these four bases for spiritual power, when developed and cultivated, are noble and emancipating. They lead to the complete destruction of suffering. They lead to utter disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Okay, those who in the past, in the future, in the present, enter and dwell in the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, have all developed and cultivated the four bases for spiritual power. Okay, so those suttas seem to show that the four bases for spiritual power are very similar in their function to the four foundations of mindfulness, the four right efforts, the five faculties, the five powers, and so on, the Noble Eightfold Path. Nothing special to differentiate them. But then we have some other suttas which show them as the vehicle for exercising the superpowers. Okay, so here, this is a sutta which I would say a bit strains the credulity of many people. Here, the Buddha is speaking to Ananda when the Buddha is in his 80th year. So he's very, very old now. So he says to Ananda, actually now that I'm 72, when you say you're 80, it doesn't seem very old. Anybody here in their 30s? 40s? When you say 80, does it seem very old? What is that?
My father's going to be close, so I'd rather not think of it as old.
Okay, so the Buddha's speaking to Ananda. He says, whoever has developed and cultivated the four bases for spiritual power, made a basis for them and so forth, if he so wished, could live on for the aeon. The aeon is like the lifespan of the universe, of the cosmos, or for the remainder of the aeon. Then he says, the Tathagata, that's referring to himself, I have developed and cultivated the four bases for spiritual power, made them a vehicle and so forth. So if he so wished, the Tathagata could live on for the aeon, or for the remainder of the aeon. So the passage also occurs in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. So the Buddha is sort of giving a hint to Ananda, and then if Ananda had asked the Buddha and said, Bhante, please, I know you've developed the four bases for psychic power. Out of compassion for the world, stay on for the aeon. Please, Bhante. Then the Buddha says he would have stayed on for the aeon. But Ananda, according to the sutta, somehow his mind was distracted by Mara, and so he didn't pick up the hint, didn't ask the Buddha to stay on. And so the Buddha then made the decision, let me relinquish my life force. And then 3 months later, he used to pass away. It sometimes occurred to me, suppose Ananda had asked the Buddha, stay on for the aeon, and the Buddha said, okay, thank you, I will. So now, all of the Buddha's disciples have passed away, generations and generations have passed away. Now we are in the year 2017. The Buddha is sitting up here giving lectures saying, disciples, everything is impermanent, strive on with diligence. Death is ever present, it's just around the corner. Don't be negligent. Anyway, okay, then the Buddha gives some description of how to exercise mastery over the four bases for spiritual power. Then he says, when the four bases for spiritual power have been developed and cultivated in this way, then a monk wields the various kinds of iddhi, the spiritual power. Having been one, he becomes many. Having been many, he becomes one. He appears and vanishes. He can pass through a wall, even through a mountain as though it were just empty space. Dives in and out of the earth as though it were water, walks on water without sinking. Sitting cross-legged, he flies through the sky like a bird. and with his hand he touches the sun and moon, and he exercises a mastery with the body as far as the Brahma world. And then the Buddha had one disciple named Moggallana, and then the Buddha said that it's because Moggallana has developed and cultivated these 4 iddhipadas that he wields those various kinds of psychic power. And then the Buddha says the same thing with regard to himself. Okay, maybe at this point I'll ask whether there's any questions on any of these things that I've covered. The 4 right efforts or the 4 bases for psychic power.
Ante, there's a question on the internet asking what are the karmatic consequences of people who abuse psychic power to oppress people?
What are the karmic consequences?
Yes.
Oh, they could be very heavy karmic consequences. Any questions? Yeah.
Does someone have to develop all 40 kammatthana to their culmination in whatever
To
state
gain
of
the
concentration?
psychic powers?
To master the psychic powers, and each one?
No, what's actually said is that the means that's given for developing the psychic powers are the kasina meditations. Those would be like circles or discs representing the 4 elements: earth, water, fire. Actually, the air can't be represented by a disc, but there are other ways to do the air kasina. Then 4 colors: red, blue, yellow, and white. And then there's the limited space kasina, and then the light kasina. And so it said that one has to be able to develop the 8 or the 4 jhanas on the basis of the 10 kasinas, and then go through changing jhanas with kasinas. It's described in Visuddhimagga chapter, I think it's chapter 12. The one that I found of the 4 iddhipadas, the one that I found a bit puzzling is citta. How could citta, because you could see each of the others has some kind of active role, that there's desire. Okay, I desire to achieve samadhi, and so that desire becomes the driving force in the attainment of samadhi. Okay, of course, energy is always present, but there could be a person for whom energy is the driving force in the attainment of samadhi. Even investigation, though it involves some thought, but somehow investigation can become the driving force in the attainment of samadhi. But it seems citta is always present. So I was puzzled how citta can be a distinct base for the achievement of psychic powers. That's why it's so fundamental that I was puzzled why it's included. Even Bhikkhu Nyanamoli in his translations, when he was translating the 4 iddhipadas, he put in brackets purity of, then mind. And then I think some translators, instead of rendering citta as mind, had rendered it as, I think, intention or resolution. But I had looked up in the Abhidhamma gives like an analysis of the four iddhipadas, and it defines citta. Whoops. Simply with the list of terms which is always used for defining citta in any other context. So here, what is citta? Whatever is citta, mano, mind, manasang, mentality, or mind, consciousness element, this is called citta. Anyway, some of these, maybe one has to experience it to understand. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Mano?
Bhante, I find it a bit strange that they use the word striving when it relates to psychic potency. It seems a little bit unusual that you would want to be striving for psychic potency.
For psychic powers?
Psychic power, sorry. It's more of a consequence as opposed to a goal.
Well, I think the striving enters in as the driving force for the attainment of samadhi, for the samadhi, not for the, of course one has to make an effort to exercise the psychic powers. They don't always arise just spontaneously. I've heard of some cases of some people who attain some of them spontaneously, the easier ones. But I think for those like multiplying the body or walking on water, one has to make the mental determination for them. Okay, let us pass on then to the next group. Okay, so the next group are the five faculties. The faculty of faith, the faculty of energy, the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration, and the faculty of wisdom. The word that is translated as faculty the Pali word is indriya, which is derived from the word Indra. Indra was the name of the ruler of the gods, at least one of the names for the ruler of the gods in the Vedas. And so Indra comes to take on the meaning of a ruler, a chief. And so indriya is a particular mental capacity which takes on the function of ruling over a particular domain of spiritual development. And so we have these five domains, and those five domains are what one believes or what one hesitates about believing. So call it the domain of conviction. The second is the domain of effort. The third is the domain of awareness. The fourth is the domain of mental focus. And the fifth is the domain of understanding. So in each of these domains, there's a particular mental quality or mental state which exercises rulership over that domain and which guides and directs and steers the mind in the right direction. So in the domain of conviction, the mental faculty is called faith, which is not, again and again I have to say this, it's not blind belief, but it's trust. We say it's the quality of trust and acceptance, in the sense the acceptance of the Buddha as being a fully enlightened one who's qualified to teach and to guide one along the path to liberation. In the domain of endeavor, what exercises rulership, what guides and controls the process is virya, or energy. In the domain of the domain of awareness or presence of mind, what exercises rulership is sati, or mindfulness. In the domain of mental focus, what exercises rulership is samadhi, which is unification of the mind. And in the domain of understanding or discernment, what exercises rulership is wisdom or insight, panya. I brought together a number of texts on the faculties. Okay, here is a sutta which defines the 5 faculties. This is from Anguttara Nikaya, Sutta 48, number 9. Okay, so what is the faculty of faith? Here the noble disciple is a person of faith, one who places faith in the enlightenment of the Tathagata, of the Buddha. So we can say that this is the decisive meaning of faith. It's accepting that the Buddha, not just a good man, a wise man, but one who has achieved the ultimate, unsurpassed enlightenment. Okay, then the faculty of energy. So here the noble disciple dwells with energy aroused for the abandoning or the elimination of unwholesome states and the acquisition of wholesome states. So he's strong, firm in exertion, not shirking the responsibility of cultivating wholesome states. And then there's another explanation of the faculty of energy by way of the 4 kinds of striving that we saw just above. Then in this particular sutta, we find a rather puzzling definition of the faculty of mindfulness. Okay, so what is the faculty of mindfulness? So the text says, here the noble disciple is mindful, possessing supreme mindfulness and discretion, one who remembers and recollects what was done and said long ago. Okay, the reason I think why the faculty of mindfulness is explained here in terms of memory, and that is because the original meaning, let's say the word sati, is derived from the verb sarati, and the original meaning of sarati before the time of the Buddha was to remember. And so outside the sphere of the Buddha's teaching, the word sati, or its Sanskrit form, smriti, was used to mean memory or remembrance. And the Buddha took the word sati from common usage and he gave it a more specialized meaning within his own teaching, particularly in regard to meditation practice. So that for the Buddha, the word sati is not so much remember, as he usually uses it, not so much remembering the past, but it's keeping in mind the object of meditation, retaining the object before the mind, keeping the object present to the mind, not letting the object drift away from the mind, or not letting the mind drift away from the object. Is there a difference between the mind drifting away from the object and the object drifting away from the mind? Is there a difference? What is the difference?
In the first one, you have a choice, but in the second one,
I wonder if it has to do with the difference between the concept of perception and the concept of thought.
Do we have another microphone? Yeah, we do.
That is, if the distinction between perception and mind or citta is important, you know, so, I mean, there are five. I'm sorry. Anyway, but if that's an important difference, then the object drifting away from the mind could be a perceptual problem, whereas the mind drifting away from the object is a problem of concentration of the mind, and both, that is, those things can both happen internally in a person, right? And so,
Okay,
yeah.
that's a good explanation. There's no right or wrong answer. It was just a question that occurred to me. Okay. So, this particular sutta is explaining the faculty of mindfulness, and it's bringing in this remembering and recollecting what was done and said long ago. But I don't think this means that it's equating the faculty of mindfulness with memory. But it's when one is mindful and one is aware what one is doing in the present, that creates the condition for having a good memory about things that happened long ago. Then another sutta that comes right after that explains the faculty of mindfulness by way of the standard formula for the 4 establishments of mindfulness. Okay, then the faculty of concentration, in this sutta is explained that the disciple gains concentration, one-pointedness of mind, having made release the object. And then the next sutta explains the faculty of concentration by way of the formula for the 4 jhanas. And then this sutta explains the faculty of wisdom. So here the noble disciple is wise, with wisdom directed to arising and passing away. So here it seems that the faculty of wisdom is connected to the wisdom of insight. So insight into the arising of phenomena, the passing away of phenomena. And the next sutta explains the faculty of wisdom with the formula for the 4 noble truths. Actually, we see that here. So the faculty of faith is to be seen in relation to the four factors of stream entry. What are the four factors of stream entry? Anybody remember them? What is that? Four purities. Okay, Asman?
If I remember correctly, I think it's the confirmed confidence in the Buddha,
Yeah.
Dhamma, Sangha, and your own sila.
Right, right. Okay, so it's unwavering confidence in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and then firm upholding of what's called the virtues dear to the noble ones, taken to be the observance of the 5 precepts. So that is where one sees the faculty of faith, and that would be the faith of a noble disciple, of one who has reached at least the stage of stream entry. So I guess below that level still, if one has not necessarily unwavering confidence, but strong confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and firm conduct that conforms to the 5 precepts, that would count as the faculty of faith. Then the faculty of energy is seen in the 4 right efforts, the faculty of mindfulness in the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration in the 4 jhanas, and the faculty of wisdom in the 4 noble truths. Okay, then after the 4 faculties comes, after the 5 faculties comes the 5 powers. The 5 powers are actually the same 5 qualities as the 5 faculties, except they have a somewhat different function, you might say. That as faculties, they exercise rulership in their particular domain. When they become the 5 powers, then we can say they are unshakable by their opposites. So when faith cannot be shaken by doubt, it's the power of faith. When energy cannot be shaken by laziness, it's the power of energy. When mindfulness cannot be shaken by forgetfulness or negligence, it's the power of mindfulness. When concentration cannot be shaken by disturbing thoughts, distracting thoughts, it's the power of concentration. And when wisdom cannot be shaken by delusion or ignorance, it's the power of wisdom. Okay, then the next on the set of factors are the 7 factors of enlightenment. So these are the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, discrimination or discernment of dhammas, phenomena, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Okay, then I just took a sutta in which a monk comes to the Buddha and asks, why are these called factors of enlightenment? And the answer seems obvious, that they lead to enlightenment, therefore they are called factors of enlightenment. Then the Buddha explains, one develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. And so one develops each of the other factors of enlightenment in that way. So it's based upon seclusion, which means seclusion from the mental defilements. And it's based upon, I would have to say it's directed towards dispassion and cessation by way it's objective and matures in release or liberation. And then the Buddha continues, when one is developing these 7 factors of enlightenment, one's mind is liberated from the asavas, from the, here we translate the taints of sensuality, craving for existence, and ignorance. And when it's liberated, there comes the knowledge, it's liberated. And so they lead to enlightenment, therefore they are called factors of enlightenment. And then I want to just complete this whole section before we stop. So then after the 7 factors of enlightenment comes the Noble Eightfold Path. So one develops right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And then for definitions of these, one can look at Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 45, sutta number 8. Or also you can look in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses, sutta number 141. So we don't have to go into the definitions of them here. Okay, any questions? Wow, if there's no questions, then either my talk was so boring, nobody.
The subject is too broad. The subject is so broad, it covers the entire Buddha Dharma. Where do we start asking questions?
Well, it could have been on something that I said. Okay, then we'll end for the morning. And so we have the question and answer section here or in the Kuan Yin Hall? You want to have it? Oh yeah, the equipment is here. Okay, so then we have to come down here. So let's say 20 after 12, since you have 5 minutes to walk. Okay, so let us end with the sharing of the merits. Okay, so we share the merits with the devas, the bhutas, the nagas, and so forth. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya vichiyetato Etantare satakayupapana rupiya rupicha sanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, next week we won't have a class, so I'll continue. And then the 4 Saturdays after that, we have 4 all-day retreats on the 4 protective meditations. So that will be first Saturday on recollection of the Buddha, Buddhanusati. The second Saturday on the meditation on loving kindness. The third Saturday will be the meditation on the 32 parts of the body. And the fourth Saturday, the one that usually turns out the most popular, is the meditation on death. Okay, so please, you don't have to register for those, but for valuable period of practice, please join those gatherings. Okay, we'll end with 3 bows to the Buddha.